I'll just give a brief introduction to Mr. Kennedy, and then we can move on to the music. Sure. Mr. Darryl John Kennedy is an American film composer and multi-instrumentalist who performs professionally on 16 instruments, in concert, and on recordings throughout the world. He's traveled over 50 countries and produced 117 CDs in musical styles ranging from classical to hip-hop. Darryl travels the world as an independent cultural ambassador, demonstrating how private citizens can be effective leaders in cultural diplomacy. He's spoken to many organizations, including the World Affairs Council of America, the Public Relations Society of America, the National Council of International Visitors, and has worked independently in cooperation with the U.S. State Department's Educational and Cultural Affairs, Citizens Exchange, and U.S. embassies abroad. Over the last 18 months, utilizing his own diplomatic artistic relativism approach in Cairo, Darryl performed in 16 major concerts with audiences of up to 12,000 people. He produced 6 CDs featuring Egyptian artists and was a guest speaker at schools including the American University of Cairo. He was also interviewed on most major TV stations, radio, and media. He was the first American to compose the soundtrack for 2 major Egyptian motion pictures and co-starred as the first American in an Arabic music video, which was seen by over 55 million people throughout the Middle East. Some might say he was just lucky, but considering that Darryl accomplished the same in Czechoslovakia, Korea, the Philippines, Russia, and other countries, that seems an impossible conclusion. This is a unique story, even more interesting that he did this without any promotion from a major record label, organizational, or political support from Washington, and with no local contacts when he first arrived in the country. So it is my pleasure to introduce composer and independent cultural ambassador, Darryl John Kennedy. Thank you.
Foreign dignitaries, distinguished guests, members of the press, I feel very honored that I've finally been able to graduate in the last 4 hours from this right chair over to this left chair. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to speak with you today about my recent success in the Middle East as a composer and independent cultural ambassador. Since my work in cultural diplomacy is strategically similar, yet tactically dependent on each country, I'll refer today only to the ways in which I implemented my approach in Egypt. I'll present a short video at the end to demonstrate what my successful strategy actually looks like in action. It seems appropriate in 2012, here in this wonderful United Nations building, to call today for a renaissance, a redefinition. In the intellectual sense, I think we are better served in this hostile political climate by first redefining cultural diplomacy conceptually as a universal, introductory solution to political détente by rational men. In this way, world leaders will understand the necessity for it, even before, during, and after a war. Winning political territory is not synonymous with winning hearts and minds. Therefore, we need to create mechanisms that build mutual confidence through mutual interests. The goal should be clearly understood by both sides. It is not enough to have the hindsight to make sense out of our past cultural mistakes. It is more important to sense the cultural mistakes we are about to make. So let us begin. No nation's culture, no matter how powerful, in the past has a monopoly on cultural achievement in the future. Yet all nations have shared in humanity's cultural failures. It is a propagated belief in fundamental religious ideology and uneducated intolerance by all nations that makes successful cultural relations so combustible. Diplomatic success today depends on the transcendence of these fundamental beliefs with a new belief, dependent on intelligent self-interests of joint projects. These thoughts bring us to my work. It would be an error in judgment to view my work as just another American musician playing songs around the world. Although my tactical approach on the ground is emotionally artistic, my strategical approach is intellectually diplomatic. When I was a boy, I deeply studied Leonardo da Vinci. His creative imagination challenged my mind to embark on a voyage of vastly different tangents of strategical thinking. Because of Leonardo, I can now visualize extremely complex problems through the nature of detached intellectual imagination. I've learned how to visualize the world as a matrix of interconnected, three-dimensional thought patterns. To metaphorically encapsulate this concept, please imagine in your own mind moving a flashlight over a net of ideas in the dark. Certain areas of the net will light up according to your position in the matrix. The objective is to learn to control the moving light while rotating the net in your mind to see what does not exist yet. For my work, that meant inventing a kind of artistic diplomatic relativity. Socratic dialectic and inductive logic does not really help you here. My approach is not intuition. It is a creative visualization of non-existent future events in order to discover past first principles in the Aristotelian sense. The answer is not to keep staring at a big cluster of international ideas, but to mentally separate world events into cultural submodalities, then mentally distorting those modalities to understand the substructure of those cultural variables. Just as Leonardo multi-processed the unseen to create the idea of the helicopter, I learned how to play 16 instruments. Once I deeply understood the concept and mechanisms of music, the instruments just became vehicles for its expression. I believe schools should not teach students to play the violin, but to express the music in their hearts through the piece of wood in their hands. My first step always is to discover the historical emotional keys to the matrix that unlocks the doors to the hearts and minds of the people. These keys are never self-evident and only appear after I've made an in-depth study of the people's reactions to historical events in comparison to the same type of events in other cultures. I always start with the most local level of the people, usually the poor. They display an emotional component key that is invisible to the aristocracy. They also reflect the sense of humor and slang that underlies the spoken language. All cultures perceive similar events differently. Now to Egypt. The world of the pharaohs is not the Egypt of today, so I adopted a radical realism to the street conditions as I found them, whether I agreed with them or not. I started with less than nothing. I knew no one. Therefore, all options were available. My first observation of the Egyptians was their tendency to do things as a group. This was demonstrated, for example, whenever a traffic accident occurred, everyone within 100 meters would run over to see what happened so they could just tell their friends who they saw there. Egyptians are a very emotional people who believe that one should just telepathically sense their feelings and their playful innocence. They like to play practical jokes on each other, and they have a great respect for their parents. Social recognition in society is a representation of self-worth. They share seemingly endless contacts. If they're not able to help you, they always seem to have a friend who can. Therefore, after deep, careful observation, I finally mapped out, visualized, and finally understood that the Egyptian cultural matrix key was a fun-loving, technologically driven, emotionally innocent people who yearn for a contemporary international recognition of a mystical, ancient mythology. I realize that Egypt is a country where social network technology is pushing the future envelope of the present, while ancient values and Islamic influence are guarding the past. This antagonistic relationship was on a collision course that I knew was unsustainable. Revolution in Tahrir Square would soon come after. As I first submerged myself into the musical world of jazz clubs and studios connecting to musicians, I was first asked to work with an Oriental jazz group called Efta as their musical producer. This is the CD. I thought this would be a perfect opportunity for a joint project. I outlined the steps of production as I've done on over 115 CDs, and we began to record. During the production, I also performed with them on stage. This led to an interest in my role with them in the Cairo media. As more interviews were made, I concluded that the most important part of this opportunity was to involve the local community in the story. One concert, I showcased a young Egyptian ballet dancer. Another concert, musicians. Another, for singers. This led to many speaking engagements in the schools and universities. It is here that I wish to stress that my talks were not about American music, but accentuated their own Arabic music effect on them in harmonic and rhythmic terms. As I performed their music, in contrast to Japanese, Indonesian, and Brazilian music, they understood how each culture was influenced by its own harmony. This freed them psychologically from any ideological bias that their music was somehow superior or inferior to any other. They simply understood that they were products of their own musical environment. This was not key only musically, but politically. Had I just played American music, they would have enjoyed my little concert. But they would have walked back to their class with the feeling that I had come there to show them how my culture was different. Therefore, since I was a foreign artist, I was better. I would have won the egotistic argument of American fame and lost the argument of unity into diversity. Therefore, my sincerity would have been compromised. This approach defines the difference between cultural diplomacy and propaganda. In a short time, I made dramatic, successful inroads to contacts. I produced another CD with a very famous local group called Westel Ballad, meaning downtown. I became the first American to co-star in an Arabic music video with a Middle Eastern star named Ebtesem, which was seen by over 55 million people throughout the Middle East. It's a story of a Middle Eastern woman who falls in love with the sound of an American musician who lives next door, but she's never seen or met him. This one. After that, I composed the soundtracks for two multi-million-dollar motion pictures, On Air and Wedding Party. Later, I met, recorded, and performed in concert and became close friends with the biggest movie stars and recording stars in the world and the Middle East, including Khalid Salim, Mohammed Riyad, Asala, Amr Diab, Nancy Agram, Yusra, and Omar Sharif. You know who those are, right? That's the film. Finally, after 15 months from starting with literally nothing in this ancient land of the pharaohs, I found myself walking down the red carpet at the Egyptian Film Festival's Academy Awards as the first nominated American film composer for a Middle Eastern film being photographed by hundreds of paparazzi. Egyptian movie stars were all around me as I was interviewed on CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Lebanese, and Egyptian national TV and radio. I was interviewed in most of the major newspapers and magazines. Soon my picture was on huge posters outside of buildings for my concerts. And some of these concerts were more than 12,000 people. In the end, my work was being heard and seen on CDs, concerts, videos, and films throughout the Middle East to over 75 million people. At this successful point, I thought it was important to form some joint international project that would feature my original work through the Egyptians. So I created a CD, project entitled Voices from the Sand, 10 Egyptian vocalists singing the songs of Darryl John Kennedy. Again, I want to stress that my first decision was to showcase local, unknown singers. Any CD that promoted famous singing stars was surely to be regarded in the media as a political tool, and that America was trying to influence the Egyptian audiences through their celebrities. That would destroy my credibility. I've learned that one should never try to influence another culture's identity of itself. The locals don't need a foreigner's input to know who they are. The CD Voices from the Sand is finished and is a great production. I officially release it today in this wonderful United Nations building with the endorsement of all the artists involved. As I have promoted the Egyptians, they have promoted me. Together we have promoted our nations in a spirit of joint goodwill. Smiles are genuine. This can only be achieved when sincerity is more important than photo opportunities, where commitment from both sides are initiated through self-interest, by helping the other side to succeed. If any side failed, the project would be doomed. I define my recent experience in Egypt as a living example of true successful cultural diplomacy on a mass level, according to the highest standards, political or otherwise. The proven results that I've achieved give me no reason to doubt that conjecture. Again, let me say that I started with nothing. Nobody paid me to do this. No government or intelligence agency sent me. No NGO used me for marketing their organization. It's as if I just asked any of you in the audience to get on a plane from JFK right now and go to Burma, knowing nobody, no help, no official title, no financing, no phone call on your behalf, no taxpayer money. You have to utilize only the local resources, and of course nobody knows you there. Then show the world what you've accomplished in 6 months on a mass level, reaching not hundreds, but millions of people. Oh, and by the way, when you leave, the people love you. Could anybody do that? I don't say that to impress you. I say that to impress upon you that when you see the video that I'm about to play, remember that as you see these final results, that I started with less than nothing. That is what is important. Some of you may ask whether this was an exception, and if my approach could be implemented in another country. To this I would answer that I have already done the same in the much more difficult political climate of Russia. This approach was also implemented successfully in the Philippines, Czechoslovakia, Japan, Indonesia, South Korea, and others. It works. And it works far better than politically motivated programs which drain the taxpayers' resources for propaganda, or as I call it, cultural Machiavellianism. Any cultural diplomatic effort that is not grounded in mutual risk and commitment at a common level of joint responsibilities will fail. There is just too much temptation for one side to walk away if they feel no one will be the wiser. The local musicians know that if they fail while on stage with me in front of an audience of 12,000, they know they'll be embarrassed by their own national press and the media in front of their own people. This is the kind of emotional leverage of dedication needed. Therefore, with these principles in mind, I would recommend 5 basic steps to those governments and organizations who want to promote cultural diplomacy and their projects to succeed en masse in today's political climate. I define soft power success where both sides win, as well as their media, economy, governments, fellow citizens, and is not seen as propaganda. 1. When you arrive in a new country, leave all your preconceived political, religious, historical, and cultural beliefs about that country at home. Search for the keys that unlock the doors to the hearts and the minds of the people. Start with the poor. Look into them, not at them. The history of their country is being told in their mannerisms. 2. Create together a tangible product, a CD, a concert, a book, a film, theater, dance. Make sure this project is difficult to accomplish well. Nobody wants to be part of some little project just for their friends. Inspire them. Make sure it is slightly beyond everyone's comfort range so that they'll have to work harder than anything they've ever done in the past. Create a timeline of how and when it will be finished. And most important, what this project will look like. And I mean exactly. 3. While your product is developed, stress the importance to your group of the interdependency of everyone involved. You will succeed or fail together. This loyalty must be instilled on all parties from the beginning. Mutual confidence through mutual verification. Don't be a committee. Be a team. 4. Start promoting this product early in the local media, through them, not through you. Do not say this project was your idea. Start with promoting intriguing stories in the local press, with them being the featured guests. You are creating a movement where everyone wins, including the press. Stress the importance this joint event has on local, national, and world perception and recognition. Inform the media that this project demonstrates alternative and successful methods that work other than just the status quo. This will create momentum. 5, upon completion of the project, let the local people take all the credit. They know that it couldn't have been done or accomplished without you. Therefore, they will speak publicly of your sincerity. This will create more interest for other projects with others. Because of your sincerity of purpose, the next group will trust you to create new products for their benefit. You'll have recommendations from everyone you've worked with because it's from the heart. This is what true cultural diplomacy should be all about. Successful local results from global people working together. In the academic sense, by raising our educational standards to the locals on the street, we create the opportunities for all mankind to participate in the higher richness of international learning. This can be the catalyst for new intellectual endeavors, as discovery is the fuel of competitive advantage. Keep in mind that I am working with them, playing their music, with their people, with their audience. I am not bringing my country and my artists to entertain them, inform, or educate them. It is my hope after you watching this video that this highly educated audience will realize 3 things. First, that my work is credible. Second, that my intentions are noble. And third, that my results are undeniable. In summary, I believe my work in Egypt succeeded in every facet of cultural diplomacy. It raised the cultural standards of the youth in their schools. We created tangible products with the local musicians and singers who now have something to be proud of. The public was both entertained and informed. In-depth discussions regarding world affairs with the intelligentsia were implemented. The press and the media had great stories. International goodwill was demonstrated through being a foreign cultural representative. Creativity was enhanced in the arts and motion pictures. And finally, I represented my own country in the highest honor of artistic citizenship, without the taxpayers' money. My work inspired not hundreds, but tens of millions, and I left Egypt being well loved by the people. For those who might say that not everyone has my artistic talent or creative mind, I say that's just an excuse for bureaucratic inaction, not a conclusion based upon experimentation. I believe that my successful approach can be implemented by any government, organization, or individual who is serious about results. It's all about closing your eyes to see. Better cultural relations really do make better foreign policy. Actions must be judged, not intentions. As cultural diplomats, let us remember that we are not members of nations, but representatives of humanity. By inviting me to speak here, the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy may find that independently, it didn't make a better world, but they may find that they did make the world better for independence. Thank you. Now I will play this video.
Thanks very much, Mr. Kennedy.